Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You always know when something shifts. Not because of yelling or slamming doors. That would be easier. No, the real fracture comes in silence. In the way her hand stops reaching for yours on the couch. In the cold kiss before work that used to be warm without trying. But this was something else. 3 weeks. No intimacy. No attempt. No explanation. Every night, I climbed into bed beside her, and she turned her back like it was instinct. I stopped counting how many times I heard, "I'm tired." What she didn't realize is that so was I. But exhaustion isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's the weight of showing up every day and still being invisible. The worst part? She used to be fire. Laughter in the kitchen. Sunday morning chaos and affection that didn't ask for anything in return. But lately, she'd become ice. And the thing about ice? It numbs everything it touches. I didn't bring it up at first. I thought maybe it was stress, work, hormones, a phase. But then it became a pattern. She'd come home, small talk, scroll through her phone, fall asleep early. No interest in conversation, no curiosity, no spark. I started staying up later. Not out of choice, out of habit. Avoiding the silence she left behind like it might smother me if I stood too close. And that's when Chloe started showing up more. Her best friend. I've known her forever friend. The one who always had a glass of wine in her hand and too much honesty in her smile. She noticed things, like how quiet it had gotten between us. How my girlfriend stopped touching me. How I started pulling back, too. One night, after dinner, Chloe stayed late. My girlfriend had already gone to bed. No goodnight kiss. No eye contact. Chloe poured another glass, sat on the other side of the couch. Said, "You look faded." I didn't respond. Because I was. And then, out of nowhere, her hand brushed mine. Just lightly. But it lingered. She looked at me like she'd been holding a secret for years. And then she said quietly, "I always wanted to. I should have pulled away. Should have stood up." But instead, I sat there frozen. Because for the first time in weeks, I felt seen. The moment Chloe's hand stayed on mine, something inside me cracked open. Not desire. Not lust. Recognition. Someone still saw me. Still found value in me. And that, after weeks of being emotionally starved, hit harder than I expected. She didn't lean in. Didn't push. Just held the silence like she knew it was louder than anything she could say. I pulled my hand away. Slowly. But not out of anger. Out of fear. Not of Chloe. But of how easy it had become to feel close to someone who wasn't the woman I lived with. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because for the first time in weeks, I actually felt alive. And that terrified me. The next morning, my girlfriend acted like everything was normal. No mention of how distant we'd become. No apology. Just cold coffee and a "don't forget the trash." She used to ask about my meetings. Text me during the day. Kiss me before leaving for work. Now, she moved like I was furniture. Useful, but invisible. Chloe didn't text me, but I could feel her presence still hanging in the room, like the scent of wine after a party's over. That weekend, my girlfriend went out of town. A girl's spa thing, she said. Left Friday, back Sunday. Didn't ask me if I had plans. Didn't say she'd miss me. Didn't even look back when she walked out. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the silence she left behind, and for the first time, I didn't chase it. Saturday afternoon, Chloe knocked. Said she forgot to grab a sweater she left last week. She walked in like nothing had happened. But everything had. She didn't mention the moment we shared. Just chatted. Smiled. Watched me cook like it was routine. But when I handed her the sweater, our hands brushed again. This time, she didn't apologize. This time, I didn't step back. She whispered, "You don't have to say anything. I just need you to know, she doesn't see what she has." And then she left. No drama. No chaos. Just another silence. But this one didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't name yet, but couldn't ignore either. And when my girlfriend came home Sunday night, all I could think was, "You left me alone for so long." Someone else noticed. She walked through the door like nothing had shifted. Tossed her bag, kicked off her shoes, asked if I'd eaten. Routine. But routine, without intimacy, becomes performance. And I had stopped being an audience. She kissed me on the cheek. The first touch in days. It didn't land. Because a kiss out of habit is worse than no kiss at all. Later, while brushing her teeth, she told me she had a great time. We needed that break, she said, like the silence between us was something we both agreed on. But I didn't speak, because I had started counting my words around her the same way I once counted her. I'm tired, excuses. Carefully, sparingly. That night, I lay next to her. She didn't reach for me. Again, and I realized, this wasn't just about touch. It was about disconnection she no longer noticed. The next morning, I checked my phone. No messages from Chloe. But I didn't need any. Because her silence felt honest. Unlike the silence in my house, which now sounded like denial. I started leaving the house more. Gym, long drives, random errands that didn't need doing. Not to avoid her, but to breathe. I became sharper, quieter, focused. And she noticed. She asked me twice if something was wrong. I said no both times. Because I'd learned, when someone stops offering effort, your explanations become background noise. That Friday, she invited Chloe over for wine night. I froze for half a second. She said, she hasn't been over in a while. I nodded. Inside, a storm started brewing. Not because I had done anything, but because I knew how close I'd come to crossing a line she didn't even know existed. Chloe arrived, hugged my girlfriend, hugged me, held my shoulder just 1 second longer than necessary. No one noticed, except me, and maybe her. We all sat, talked, drank. The tension wasn't spoken, but it was there, hovering like smoke in the air, unseen but thick. And when my girlfriend left the room to grab another bottle, Chloe looked at me and said nothing, just looked. And in that look, I heard everything. A warning, a pull, a choice. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't come with moaning or madness. Sometimes it arrives on quiet nights, in the eyes of the one who finally sees you. That night burned itself into my memory not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. After the third glass of wine, my girlfriend grew louder, started laughing too much, touching Chloe's arm, telling stories about college days, trying to recapture a closeness she hadn't shown me in months. But the more she smiled at Chloe, the more I watched Chloe look at me, and something about that triangle felt off. Not dangerous, just fragile. She was testing something. Maybe herself. Maybe me. After midnight, my girlfriend stumbled upstairs, said she was going to bed. Didn't even check if I was coming. That's how routine our disconnect had become. Chloe stood in the kitchen, rinsing her glass, not saying much. I hovered nearby, unsure what came next. She turned, leaned against the counter, and looked at me. Not like a friend. Not like a mistake. Like a question. Like a door half open. I didn't move. Neither did she. And the silence between us was louder than anything either of us could have said. Then she whispered, "You don't deserve this." I swallowed hard, nodded once, and walked away. Because if I stayed, even a second longer, we wouldn't come back from it. I lay in bed next to my girlfriend that night, listening to her soft breathing. She reached for me in her sleep. Reflex, not affection. I let her hand stay there. But I didn't close my eyes. Because the real betrayal wasn't Chloe. It was how numb I'd become to the one I was supposed to love. That was the moment I knew. I had already started to leave. Not with my body, but with my mind. And once a man mentally walks out the door, there's no sound, no touch, no apology that can drag him back in. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table alone. Chloe's glass was still in the sink. My girlfriend came downstairs, hair messy, voice flat. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't say good morning, just scrolled her phone and muttered something about work. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't Chloe who crossed a line. It was my girlfriend, by making silence louder than betrayal. After that morning, I stopped expecting anything. Not affection, not effort, not answers. And in that void, something else was born. Clarity. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse, didn't beg for attention. Instead, I started preparing. It wasn't revenge. It was recentering. I changed my banking passwords, quietly redirected direct deposits to a separate account. She never noticed. She was too busy posting filtered brunch photos and captioning them with hollow quotes about growth and alignment. She didn't ask why I stayed out later, why I started dressing better, hitting the gym more, laughing louder with people who weren't her. She thought I was moving on from stress. What she didn't realize was I was moving on from her. Chloe stopped coming around. We didn't talk, but I saw her once, downtown. She passed me on the sidewalk, paused, gave a slight nod. No smile, just acknowledgement. There was no bitterness between us, only a quiet understanding. We were both witnesses to something that was already collapsing. A week later, my girlfriend finally noticed. Asked why I was so distant. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I felt nothing. Not rage, not desire, just stillness. So I said, nothing's wrong. And it was the first time I'd told the truth in weeks. Because what was happening wasn't wrong. It was necessary. That night, she tried to touch me, placed her hand on my chest, leaned in. But I didn't respond. And she knew. The fear in her eyes wasn't about losing me. It was about losing control. Because when a man pulls back without drama, without shouting, without ultimatums, that's when the power shift happens. She asked if I still loved her. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because some questions only exist to soothe the person asking. The next morning, I woke up early, packed a bag, left a note. This silence used to hurt me. Now it's my peace. No goodbye, no fight, just exit. And as I locked the door behind me, I didn't feel like I was leaving her. I felt like I was returning to myself. The first night away was silent, but not empty. I stayed at a friend's loft. No TV, no distractions, just me, a notebook, and the sound of myself breathing again. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness. She made me feel alone in a room we shared. Now, I felt whole in a space that was mine. She didn't call. Not that night. But the texts came the next morning. Where are you? Why would you just leave? I don't deserve this. Funny. She never asked if I deserved silence. Neglect. The slow withdrawal of every form of affection. She only noticed absence when it belonged to her. That's when I learned something. People don't miss you. They miss their control over you. I didn't reply. Not for punishment. For preservation. She called Chloe. I know because Chloe texted me one line. She's unraveling. I didn't answer that either. Because this wasn't about Chloe. It wasn't about revenge. It was about detachment. I wasn't planning to explain myself to someone who dismissed me for weeks. You don't owe closure to the one who taught you distance. I started sleeping better, waking earlier, running again, and most importantly, breathing deeper. I looked through old photos one afternoon, smiling versions of us, laughing snapshots at beaches, birthdays, and bars. But none of them were recent. All of them were echoes. Ghosts of a relationship she stopped feeding long before I stopped showing up. She texted again. I get it. I was distant. Can we talk? No. Because what she wanted was not understanding. She wanted me to pause her consequences. But Shadow never pauses. He observes. Plans. Moves without announcement. My silence was not passive. It was tactical. It was the most powerful version of me she'd never expected. Because real strength isn't in raising your voice. It's in lowering your access. And by the time she realized that, I was already someone else. Someone she couldn't reach. The silence finally broke. She showed up outside the loft. Red eyes. No makeup. Hoodie half zipped like she didn't care what she looked like for once. I didn't invite her in. She stood there, twisting her fingers, searching for a script. Said, I've been thinking a lot. I didn't interrupt. Just stood in the doorway. Quiet. Cold. Focused. She started listing things. Regrets. Realizations. Excuses dressed up as clarity. I didn't realize how far I pulled back. I thought we were just tired. I didn't know it affected you that much. Every word she said landed too late. And too softly. Because the version of me that once waited for her affection no longer existed. She wanted a conversation. But I wasn't there for discussion. I was there for finality. She asked if I could come home. If we could rebuild. But rebuild what? A house where one person stopped knocking? A bed that became a border? I told her calmly. I already moved out. She blinked. Your stuff's still there. I looked her in the eyes and replied, no, I moved out of needing you. That landed harder than any scream ever could. She started to cry, but I didn't flinch. Because this wasn't about breaking her. It was about not breaking myself anymore. She asked about Chloe. I didn't answer. Not because I was hiding something, but because Chloe wasn't the problem. She was the mirror, the reminder that I still had worth. Even if the woman I loved forgot it. When she left that day, there was no hug. No dramatic goodbye. Just a woman walking away slower than she arrived. For the first time, she looked smaller. Because power doesn't come from yelling. It comes from walking away quietly. While the other person is still explaining what they meant to do. Weeks passed. I didn't go back. Didn't text. Didn't scroll her socials. Didn't ask mutual friends how she was doing. Because once a man removes his emotional leash, he doesn't chase the hand that once yanked it. Then, one night, Chloe messaged me. Not flirty, not emotional, just 6 words. You free to talk this week? I stared at it for a while. Not because I was unsure, but because part of me had finally stopped needing permission to move forward. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. No makeup, no games. She looked like herself. The woman who once gave me a look in the kitchen that said everything, without saying anything. We didn't talk about my ex. Not at first. We talked about books, music, silence, pain, healing. And then, softly, she said, I always saw it. How tired you looked. That sentence nearly cracked something inside me. Because being unseen by the person you love is one thing. But being seen by someone who wasn't even supposed to notice. That's where clarity hits hardest. She never tried to touch me. Never leaned in. She wasn't there to steal me. She was there to reflect what I had become. Someone who outgrew being neglected. Someone who no longer begged for crumbs in a house where love starved itself. When I left the coffee shop, I didn't feel pulled toward Chloe. I felt released from my past. And sometimes, that's what the other woman really is. A mirror, not a replacement. That night, my ex called. I let it ring. Because if someone only starts dialing when the silence gets loud, they're not calling for you. They're calling for themselves. And I was done answering to echoes. I changed my number the next day. Not to be dramatic. To be free. Because the moment I realized I didn't even care what she had to say, that was the moment I knew I'd healed. I updated my banking, shut down old joint accounts, unsubscribed her from every shared app, every digital thread that tethered us. No big speeches. Just deletion. Because sometimes the loudest closure is the quietest click. I sold the apartment 2 months later. She tried to fight it at first, claiming emotional investment, history, even hinted at legal resistance. But none of it landed. Because she didn't realize, when you lose emotional leverage, legal leverage becomes pathetic. She eventually backed off. I think part of her hoped I'd still offer kindness. But I didn't. Not out of cruelty. Out of evolution. Shadow doesn't retaliate. He redefines. I donated the couch we never sat on together, trashed the duvet we hadn't shared in months, boxed up the photos and burned them without ceremony. Each item gone felt like weight removed from my chest. Chloe moved to another city around that time. We didn't keep in touch. Not out of bitterness, but because her role in my story wasn't a sequel. It was a spark. She helped me remember what being seen felt like. That was enough. You don't chase the people who reminded you of your worth. You thank them in silence and let them go. I picked up painting again. Volunteered. Started traveling. Not to run, but to rebuild. Every flight was a goodbye to the version of me who once begged to be chosen. Every sunrise became proof that I could wake up without missing anyone who didn't miss me first. And that's when I finally understood. I wasn't her loss. She was mine, and I chose to lose her. Because sometimes survival isn't escaping someone. It's escaping who you became around them. 6 months later, I passed her by chance. Bookstore. Mid-afternoon. She was alone, staring at the self-help section like she was trying to rebuild what she never thought could break. She didn't see me, and I didn't let her. Because part of healing is understanding you don't need to be seen to be whole. I left without a word. No stare. No second glance. Just gone, like I'd never existed in her world. But she existed in mine long enough to teach me what silence really meant. Not emptiness. Not defeat. But power. When I got home that night, I found an old letter she'd written months before we fell apart. It had fallen behind a drawer I never opened. It said, I'm afraid I'm losing myself. I don't know how to love right now. I folded it once, then twice, then dropped it into the trash. Because I wasn't the one she lost. She was. And that wasn't my burden anymore. I lit a candle, poured a drink, sat on the balcony while the city moved below me, unaware of the man who had once been broken inside that apartment. There's a version of me she'll never meet. The man who didn't flinch when left unread. Who didn't chase what wasn't holding him. Who didn't need closure to close the door. She thought I would yell. Break. Beg. Instead, I vanished. And sometimes, the cruelest goodbye is the one that never happens. She's probably still wondering why I stopped calling. Why I didn't block her to make a point. Why I never came back, even for closure. But that's the thing about Shadow. He never returns to the flame that burned him. He becomes the fire. And when she tells the story, she'll either lie or say, he just left. But I didn't just leave. I rose. And I never looked down. You wanted silence? Here it is. And now, it's only you in it. been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.